few requests to cook something sweet, I have decided that I am going to do some chocolate chip walnut cookies. These are not going to be your regular thin, chewy or crispy cookies. These are going to be New York style, thick, fat, chunky cookies. All right, these are going to have so much volume to them. Well, at least I'm hoping. I haven't made them before, so this is going to be a bit of a test run. I might need to modify the recipe after this, but we will see. So what I've got here is 225 grams of cold butter. I have just taken this out of the fridge. This is different to our usual cookie recipes. Usually you want it to be room temperature or slightly softened. We want to keep this cold so we have the best chance for it not to melt down when we put it in the oven. We want it to keep as much structure and form as possible. We've got 1 cup of brown sugar to give it that depth of flavor and that chewiness to our cookies. We have half a cup of our caster sugar. We've got 2 eggs, 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You could also use cake flour for this. However, I didn't have access to any. Cake flour just has a lower amount of protein, which makes it have a bit more of a fluffy texture. We've got 1 teaspoon of corn flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt. If you are using already salted butter, just use 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then I've got a cup of walnuts. I've toasted these as well, so they're not raw. And 1.5 cups of chocolate. I have just used and cut up some Cadbury chocolate. The reason that I'm doing this is because I want these to be a more extravagant cookie than just your standard chocolate chip cookies. We're going to make these really luscious, really big. So this has given me the opportunity to cut the chocolate up into nice, thick pieces. All right. We also don't want to use baking chocolate either because it doesn't have the best flavor when it comes to chocolate. You're better off using real chocolate. All right, so to start making our cookies, we are going to put our 225 grams of cold butter into a large mixing bowl. To that, we're going to add 1 cup of brown sugar and half a cup of caster sugar. We are then going to give this a really good mix. We want to cream this for around about 4 minutes or until it is nice and light and fluffy and all these ingredients are mixed together well. Remember, this will be a lot harder to cream than your usual cookie mixture because we are using hard butter that has just come out of the refrigerator. So you just have to be patient until it all combines together well and then starts the creaming process. So this is not quite ready yet, but as you can see, it is starting to come together and it is starting that process of creaming. The butter has nearly combined with the sugars. We just need to keep going, keep being patient with it until it all combines together. As you can see here, our mixture is nicely creamed together. There's no obvious chunks of butter. It's all combined well into our sugars here. Now what we need to do is scrape off the sides and add our eggs one by one. We need to make sure that we are adding these separately. These are cold eggs again out of the refrigerator. We want to make sure that our dough has the best chance of remaining cold before we cook it. That's 1 egg. Now let's add our second egg. Once again, make sure that we are cracking these separately before we are adding them into our mix. This just ensures that we're not getting any shell or we're not putting a rotten egg into our mixture. All right, now it's time for us to add our dry ingredients. We've got here our 2.5 cups of our all-purpose plain flour. That's 2.5 cups there. We've got our 1 teaspoon of corn flour. So our corn flour is going to act as a thickener for this mixture without having to add more flour and drying out the mix. So we've got 1 teaspoon of corn flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of our baking soda, and We've got our salt here. We are going to ditch the electric mixer now because we want to make sure that we are just stirring this in and we're not over mixing it, because then we're going to make our batter dry. We've nearly all combined this. It's not quite mixed together, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my chocolate and my walnuts, and now we'll give it our final mix. If we had added those in after all our dry ingredients were mixed in, we would have been over stirring the mixture. So we just want to be cautious that we're just mixing it and we're keeping the volume in. We are making sure that we're stirring large movements and we're folding our mix around as opposed to beating it, because then we're going to lose all the air in our mixture and our cookies won't be as fluffy as we want them to be. Alright, what I've got here is I have 2 baking trays. These I have actually sprayed down with some olive oil spray first. This is just to make sure that they are not going to stick and they have no chance of getting stuck to the bottom of that tray when we lift these up to rest. So, as you can see, this is just combined. It's still got lots of volume to it. And we're going to take these out. We're not even going to roll them. We're just going to place them in big heaped balls. We don't want to overwork this mixture here, because we want these to look rustic, look chunky, and it doesn't matter if they're not a really nice smooth consistency, because that's not the look we're after with these. This mix just said that it was going to make around about 8 cookies. By the looks of it, if I were to make 8, these would be huge because I still have lots of mixture left over. So what I'm going to do is make these slightly smaller than the recommended amount and make 10 to 12. I only have 2 trays and I don't want to pack this anymore because they will spread and I don't want them to get caught on one another. Now that I have my mixture all ready to go, I'm actually going to put these in the fridge for 15 minutes to half an hour, depending how much time you have, to cool down to make sure they reset. This will just mean that they'll be nice and firm when we put them into the oven, and they won't have as much chance to spread down and seep to be thin cookies, because we want to keep the volume in this. So my cookie dough has come out of the fridge now. It has been in there for 30 minutes. What I did with that remaining batter was I've made 3 extras and I've just put a chocolate filled caramel inside them. So I'm hoping that once they are cooked and you can break them open, you'll see the oozy caramel coming out of those ones there. We'll see how they go. That's a bit of a test run. I've got my oven preheating to 210 degrees. It has reached temperature now. We're going to cook these for 10 to 15 minutes. After the 10 to 15 minutes, as keen as we will be to eat them, we will have to rest them for 15 minutes so the residual heat finishes the cooking process there. So our cookies have been cooking for 15 minutes and they've also been resting for that 10 to 15 minutes that we are after. Just going to break one open to show you inside.